The sun was just beginning to rise over the vast fields, casting a golden glow over the dewdrops clinging to the tall grass. Yusuf, a hard-working farmer, wiped his brow as he stepped out of his small cottage, ready to begin another long day of work. He had lived on this farm for years, tending to his crops and livestock with patience and dedication. Life was simple, but it was all he had ever known. As he reached for his tools by the doorstep, a strange feeling washed over him, an eerie silence that was unlike the usual morning sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves. His heart pounded as he turned to look at the wooden door of his cottage, and what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Towering over him was a massive creature, its body covered in thick, dark fur that shimmered in the early light. Its eyes, glowing an unsettling shade of amber, stared at him with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. The monster had enormous claws, sharp and curved like scythes, and its deep, slow breathing rumbled through the air like distant thunder. Yusuf took an instinctive step back, gripping the handle of his rusted farming tool. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Creatures like this belonged in legends and bedtime stories told to frighten children, not standing at the door of a simple farmer. The monster didn't move. It simply stood there, watching him. It didn't snarl, didn't roar, just observed. Yusuf knew that if it had wanted to attack, it could have done so already. Swallowing his fear, he took a cautious step forward. "What, are you?" he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. The creature blinked slowly, as if considering his question. Then, to Yusuf's shock, it lowered its massive body and sat down like a giant dog resting after a long journey. It still loomed over him, but something in its posture felt less threatening. Realizing that fear wouldn't solve anything, Yusuf forced himself to stand tall. If this monster had come to his doorstep, there had to be a reason. He had always believed that nature had a balance, that everything had a purpose. Perhaps this creature was no different. Mustering his courage, he hesitantly reached into the small satchel tied around his waist, pulling out a piece of bread from his morning meal. He held it out with a trembling hand, unsure if the creature would accept it or if he was making a terrible mistake. For a moment, the monster remained still, its amber eyes locked onto Yusuf's offering. Then, with surprising gentleness, it extended one of its massive claws and carefully took the bread. It sniffed it before eating, its sharp teeth making quick work of the simple food. Yusuf exhaled, only now realizing he had been holding his breath. The creature let out a low, rumbling sound, not quite a growl, but something softer, something almost like gratitude. For days, the monster remained by Yusuf's farm, never harming him, his animals, or his crops. He noticed how it would watch him work, how it seemed almost curious about his daily routine. In time, Yusuf grew more comfortable around the giant being. He even spoke to it, telling it stories as he worked, even if he wasn't sure if it understood. One evening, after a long day of harvesting, Yusuf sat on his porch and looked up at the sky, the stars shining brightly above. The creature sat beside him, its massive form blending into the night. "Maybe you were lost," Yusuf said, glancing at it. "Or maybe you were just looking for someone who wouldn't run away." The monster blinked at him, and for the first time, Yusuf thought he saw something human in its eyes, something ancient, something wise. Then, one morning, as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature was gone. Yusuf searched for it, calling out, but there was no sign of its enormous tracks, no lingering presence. It had vanished without a trace. But even as he returned to his farm, he knew that something within him had changed. He was no longer just a simple farmer. He was someone who had met the unknown, who had faced fear and chosen kindness instead. And somewhere out there, he liked to believe, the monster remembered him too.